5, 6, 7, 8.
Discover, connect, engage, become. Discover, connect, engage, become. Discover, connect, engage, become with CURNcast.
Hello, and welcome to the CURNcast, a podcast where we are breaking down the barriers to research. I'm your host and research friend, Lauren Okeno, and I can't wait to get into today's episode. Let's check it out. I would like to acknowledge that the CURNcast is being recorded and created on the traditional and unceded territory of the Tecumlipse to Secwepemc within Secwepemcúlecw. I am very grateful to be able to learn, play, and create on these beautiful lands. Welcome to our special guest of this episode, Director of Student Research and Public Engagement, Sukh Heer Matonovich. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today just because I know that you are instrumental in developing undergrad research at TRU, and I've gotten to witness that firsthand, and I've had the pleasure of working with you. So yeah, it's good to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Lauren, and thank you for the compliment. I'll start with that, but I would just like to add that it's been the students and working with them as co-creators and also the faculty and staff in the university's willingness to really put student research training at the center of what we do. So it's just a pleasure to be part of that team.
As you know, you're oh so humble, but that's, I think, part of why you are doing such an amazing job is because we are looking at students at the center of things, and students really get to see themselves in their work, and that's so important in research and in learning in general. So that's something I truly value, and it's something that I hope more people will start to see after this episode.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren.
So to get us warmed up a little bit, I want to start with some lightning round questions. And basically how this works is I'm going to say the question, and then you're going to respond with the first thing that comes to mind. Try to keep it short and sweet.
Oh my. Okay, here's a test. So it's a competition. Fast and quick.
Yeah.
Okay, all up for it.
A little bit of a challenge to get us started this morning.
All right,
so
let's do this.
First question is, what was the last thing that you researched?
Undergraduate research.
Great answer. What is a current research interest of yours?
Current research interest is really the role of students who have not participated in research and why.
That's a great one. And we'll probably get into more of that later. Who is your research muse?
Dr. Wilgert Betts.
What is your research superpower?
Collaboration.
What do you wish more people knew about research?
Anyone can do it.
Who and what inspires you?
Students.
Next one, do you have a favorite quote, and what is it?
No human is limited.
I love it. Okay, and final question, message to future TRU student researchers.
To future researchers?
Yeah.
To know that you are researchers.
Cool. I love that these are all sticking very closely to the theme of what I want to talk about today. So it's almost the perfect segue into the why of this episode. I really thought back to my own research journey. I completed my undergraduate degree at TRU in sciences, and I had the pleasure of doing a lot of undergrad research in both chemistry and then also on the student side working as a research ambassador in the office. And so I have witnessed all of the benefits and great things that research has to offer. But at the beginning of that journey, there is a lot of these barriers and kind of unknowns surrounding a lot of things. For me, it was not knowing who to talk to, a little bit of imposter syndrome, not feeling like I could do research. And so that's what I really wanted to tackle in this episode, is looking at what can we pass on to students about research? How can we get more students involved in research, and how can we get more students to see themselves in research? Because I think everyone has the potential to do it in some capacity, and we want to inspire people to do that. So I would love it if you could describe your research journey a little bit. What is your background? Are you traditionally a researcher? And how did you come to end up in the position you are now?
Sounds good. Well, thanks so much, Lauren. It's a real privilege to be here and to answer these questions in a way that I think makes sense for hopefully for students, for ourselves, for our office, for the institution, and anybody else who may be listening. So my research journey, I'm a first generation learner that came from a place that possibly didn't see themselves graduating from university, but knew that they wanted to go there, and sport was my vehicle to do that. I'm a former athlete here at TRU, Distinguished Alumni for Athletic Achievement. So sport was my vehicle to get an education, and somewhere along the line, things shifted where it wasn't about sport. It became about the journey. So my research journey did not start in undergraduate research. It's not something that I saw myself doing. I did not see myself as a research. Very similar, we'll talk a little bit about later. It was something that I only saw that scientists and sciencey people do. And I'm from the social sciences. I have an undergrad in social work, so never even touched upon research. But many years later, there were certainly skills that I had developed that did speak to it. So I would say research for me started when I began to use the word was probably when I did my graduate work. And it was focused on a research question that really looked at what academic engagement is in particular at TRU. And it was interesting what came of it in terms of the research. My methods that we used was focus groups, a lot of focus groups. So interview skills were important, but something that I had developed at my undergrad level. And so those transferable skills that you don't recognize that you're building are extremely important. And I think that was the tipping point for me around the transformation, how research can be brought to life in so many ways.
And you touched on this a little bit, but initially you didn't consider yourself as a researcher. And then when did you really start to adopt that identity?
I'll be really honest, it probably wasn't until I came into the research office. So even my graduate work, I still never put that hat on as a researcher. I think it changed in the moment when we started to look at a research project that looked at undergraduate research at TRU. And in that moment is when we started to see how research can inform and drive change in ways that are transformative.
Welcome to Hit the Streets. I'm Hannah.
And I'm Julianne. This is a segment where we ask strangers weirdly specific questions about research.
Now, let's hear from our first victim. What is research?
I would say exploring the field, getting to know it better, and kind of finding discrepancies in it.
I would say research is coming up with new conclusions to questions that you don't know the answers to.
Finding solutions to problems.
Looking into something that you don't already know stuff about.
Learning something that is not what we know, or something getting more knowledge on things.
Research is exploration into a question or idea or a series of thoughts. It is working with people. It is reflecting on yourself and your values. And it's really fun.
Research is something that you kind of look into on a topic that you kind of want to learn more about.
It's when you try to understand something from a different perspective compared to how other people would have interpreted, and you find your own interpretation.
Honestly, on the spot, I can't give you an answer. Finding out things in a scientific way, I suppose.
Oh my gosh, research, it's I feel people get the wrong idea when they're I've done research on this topic, but I feel it's not just doing a quick Google search, it's actually doing your own studies and with usually real people or real things that actually back up your statement, not just other people's sources.
Well, when I think of research, I think of a more detailed and accurate collection of data, whether it's quantitative or qualitative, and an analysis of the effects of that data.
And that's it for question 1. Now back to our regularly scheduled programming.
I'm curious to know what your personal definition of research is. I know this can look slightly different for a lot of people, but I'd love you to share that with us.
Sure. So my definition is it's the ability for the researcher to create new knowledge, and in the last few years I've added a word in there to tweak the definition, and it's really the ability to create or attempt to create new knowledge. And I think knowing and understanding the process in how we do that, because sometimes it's not, but knowing how you go about that and attempting to do it, that's what research is all about.
So now that we've talked about your personal definition of research, I'm curious to know what the research landscape currently looks like at TRU.
Yeah, so I think what we've been doing in the last 5 years in particular, we took the programs that we've had great success with. And so folks are familiar with the UREAP, which is the Undergraduate Research Award Program. It's a $6,000 scholarship for students to do their own research. It builds some really good skills for students to scaffold into grad school. So, for example, going into a portal and putting an application together that includes the different components of the application that are tied to research, and then they're building in a budget. And there was only 10 awards in the fall, and somewhere between 24 to 28 of those awards kind of awarded in the winter. And so in order to build capacity, we need to be able to see how else we can get students engaged in different things. So I think it was 2018, we wanted to go out and talk to students, not just those students that were in upper level, because those students that know that they need research to go to med school, to grad school, and all those are finding ways and those opportunities that exist, because they do at TRU. But how do we just bring them to the forefront? So we decided to go out and ask the questions, because our data really, if we wanted to look at what our data looked like, it was very much, well, most of our students that are getting the awards within our office, high GPA, they were tagged to other research programs that were on campus, but we didn't see a depth and a variety of programs. So as a comprehensive university, we've got visual arts to trades to a law school to business degrees to professional degrees. How is that represented in how we are looking at student research? And so we went out and did a research question and asked students to define some simple questions. What is their definition of research? Where do they see the opportunities are? And where are the barriers? And we asked them to use a methodology that we called cultural mapping, where students have their lived experience and they use a draw talk protocol to be able to share that with us. We collected well over 100 maps, not just from students, but faculty as well, because the perceptions of faculty was really interesting to hear as well in terms of what they thought, and then the perceptions of students. But from students from a variety of backgrounds, so not just science, but also from arts, from trades, just from different spaces and places we can acquire visual arts, first year all the way to fourth. And what was telling to us was the gap between lower level and upper level. Students in first and second year didn't see themselves as researchers. Their definition of researcher, and we have maps that show this, is very sciencey. Where does it happen? Where does research occur? Was very much in labs, in the library, at a computer, and so very narrow perspective of what their thoughts of research are. And so when we use the definition around the attempt to create new knowledge, there was a gap around what does research look like. Yet when we went to the upper level students, even those that may not have participated, they had a really good sense of where it occurs, and what are the opportunities, because the sophisticated students can walk through the opportunities and a map of how they're going to get them to their goal. They identified the leaders on campus, the mentors, the faculty mentors, where research is truly a relational piece, because it can't be done without that integral role of the faculty, and they identified those faculty mentors to them. And so, but those gaps were missing on the first and second year. And so to your question, in a long narrative, is that we've now scaffolded opportunities at the lower level too, to allow students to come in and get some of that research training. And I think when we look at the landscape of research, then if we allow some training early on, it gives faculty an opportunity to have students that are built in and ready and have had some training around methods, and then faculty get the privilege of then just putting their disciplinary lens to some of that basic training, because we do know with research there is that disciplinary lens that need to be added in terms of different methods and how questions are asked and how methods are applied, and then also how that knowledge is mobilized. So I think that's been kind of the telling point for us, is the gaps. So scaffolding those programs to be able to address that, and we continue to do that in the office. And lastly, because this has been a long response to your question, because I'm really passionate about it, is that we could not have done this without the voice of students. And so students informed what were the gaps, and then we identified students to work with us to co-create what those programs would look like. Because it's one thing to hear it, but then to apply it can only be done by those that know how to, that have been through that lived experience. So students who have, such as yourself, Lauren, as you've mentioned, who have been through the experience and know strategically how to, but then also the students who haven't, and engaging them in a process to say, here are the gaps and here's how we can do that.
Hey, welcome back to Hit the Streets. Hear that funky music beat? Let's hear from question 2 now. Would you consider yourself a researcher?
Probably not.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, in a way, but not like as like a PhD student or anything, actually researching something.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so.
I would consider myself a researcher because I'm passionate about uncovering the truth of the universe.
Yeah, I would say so for certain things, yeah.
100%, because we are always studying something.
Yes, when I'm writing a research paper.
Once upon a time, no. Now, yes.
Yeah.
The ability to go out and explore different ways of how you assess and do things, you're a researcher.
Every day we get new knowledge, so obviously we are researchers.
I think if a topic interests me enough, I will fully go out of my way to find out every single tiny detail about it. So
occasionally.
I would. For many courses and stuff, I've researched a lot, wrote 3 research papers this semester, so yeah, I would.
Well, that's it for question 2.
See you next time on Hit the Streets, folks.
So I'm curious to know now, what do you think the most common misconception about research is?
I think what it is right now, the misconception is that it's not for me. I can't do that. And so we launched a program this year, and we called they're our student research innovators, and we call them innovators because we want them to help recreate innovative programming for new student researchers. And the criteria of that was that we wanted them to have no knowledge of research. And had multiple students have individual meetings with me before they applied to say, I don't think I can do this. And I said, well, the criteria is you don't need to know anything. And I think sometimes that word research, gets people to go, no, it's not me. And I think the misconception that the word research is something that I don't do is something we want to debunk, and we want people to see that when you come to TRU, every student can have a chance at doing it in a different way.
And that's kind of a message that I like to try and tell any undergrad or someone who asks me for advice is what do you do in your undergrad? What should I be working on? And I like to say that you should treat it as your playground, to try things out, to take opportunities that you normally wouldn't, and to do something different and see what comes out of it. And that's when some really cool stuff can happen. Now that we've talked about the common misconception, which is a lot of people don't see themselves in research, I want to switch to and flip to the other side. Who can do research and who should be doing research?
I love it. Who can and who should? I think every student. I think every student should have the opportunity, but also being part of a university environment. I believe research is something that students should understand. We're not going to say that everybody needs to do it, but being part of a post-secondary institution, knowing and understanding the role that research plays and the role that universities play with research, I think is fundamental. And I think also developing those skills when students leave post-secondary, is that they know how to critically look at things analytically, knowing that things sometimes are not just because it's said this way. Like, it came from somewhere. Someone did research somewhere that informed that this is the practice and the process that should be used. And I think to train the next generation is to be able to critically look at these and those attempts and an ability to create new knowledge and new processes. And really that's what innovation in very specific fields is all about. So whether it's not just in sciences, but it's also in social sciences, it's in our communities, it's within municipalities. So I think allowing students to be able to see that research goes beyond just what you use the theory in the classroom, and then how you can apply that disciplinary thinking into a research project and into the real world, and how research can inform housing and homelessness, the opioid crisis, and there's lots of real issues that are going on in our own backyard. And I think being able to leverage research to be able to look at ways of how communities are structured. And so these are all things that go into, what the question is, and then what method you apply, and then how you share that, like how it can change or inform policy, and how it can change your own practices, how it can develop best practices. That's where research becomes critical. And I think for students to, even if they don't do it, to understand the impact of what it can. But what we hope is that every student at some point in their undergraduate degree at Thompson Rivers University will get an opportunity to be engaged in some type of research.
So I guess people who should do research, it could be, just a small, simple curiosity, or someone who really wants to get involved in making change and being involved in community. So that's really cool. Okay, so now I think you touched on it a little bit, but why should we be engaging in research?
You know what? I think at the heart of it is we want students, and students want this as well. They're looking for transformative learning experiences that are tied to their passions, experiences that are tied to something that they believe that they've been part of. And I think that's just the bottom line around what research can do. It provides you an ability to come up with something that you're passionate about. Like that's we should even add that as part of the research arc. What is the question is something that, identify something you're passionate about, because that really, when you're not passionate about it, then it feels like work.
Yeah.
Right.
But that can be hard too sometimes.
Oh, totally. And
that's a lesson
exploring.
In itself,
yeah.
Learning and giving yourself permission to do that and figure out what you are interested in. So.
And that's what universities are for, right? It's that that space to be able to explore that. And I think that's just that form of student engagement, to say that, there's these requirements that you need to get your degree. But within those requirements, there's this wonderful space and place to be able to try new things and leverage different ways of looking at it. And, we know of the traditional ways that students will volunteer with groups and organizations and whatnot. But we're also saying that one naturalized way that we would like to see it is that it becomes natural, is that research is that mechanism that can be used in a way to help you explore what those passions are.
I think that's super beautiful and really highlights the uniqueness and the special thing that TRU has going. I could never quite put my finger on it, but I think that describes it really well. So my last question for you, Sukh, is if students are listening to this podcast, if they're thinking, maybe I can start to see myself in research, where should they go? How should they start to get involved?
Awesome. Well, we are, so when we say we, it is the Office of the Vice President Research, and within that is the Office of Student Research and Public Engagement. Can visit us on the second floor of OLERA, so that's the Old Library and Research Annex, which is at the kind of heart of the campus, next to the clock tower and across from Old Main. So come visit us there. We are also online at tru.ca/research. And for those of you that might have imposter syndrome and want to check out, like, okay, before I go talk to them, I want to see what's going on, you can certainly talk about go to the site. It's Kern, or help me out, Lauren?
Yeah, CURN, so CURN.truebox.ca. I'll put it in the link of the description of the podcast, and it'll be easy to just click on. But yeah, that's a great place to start as well.
Yeah, that site in particular, I think, for students, because it's been developed by students based on their own journeys around what they felt that they needed to know before they had the confidence to go tap a faculty mentor on the shoulder. But I think what you'll find on the second floor of Allura with us is that we want you to come in with not knowing anything, and that's what we're here to do. Is by the end of when you leave talking to us, is that there's a sense of, okay, I can do this.
Thank you to our special guest, Sukh, for sharing all that knowledge and wisdom about research. You definitely debunked some research myths for me, and I also want to thank you as a listener for tuning into the CURNcast. Join us again for the next episode where we'll continue to break down more barriers to research.